So, I have this from the Ring magazine. Actually, have a look on screen. Just have a look on screen. That was about 4 years ago now. I can't actually remember the date in May, but I'm sure it would have been 4 years. I'm sure it would have been early May. Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders. That was the last time Billy Joe Saunders set foot in the boxing ring. Did a good performance that night. He did. He won a couple of rounds. I thought Canelo was well in control, but Billy Joe had his moments. He's in good shape. And still had a lot left in the tank. It seemed anyway. So it's a shame in a way, in a sense of a selfish boxing fan's perspective, that he didn't just, come straight back. Instead, as we've seen in recent clips, and as we saw at the Eubank Ben fight, he is way, and I mean way out of shape. And Billy Joe's always been someone who's ballooned in between fights, but goddamn, he's well into the heavyweight division now. I mean, this was a guy who wasn't even a particularly big middleweight. So 160 pounds, he's probably 60, 70 pounds over that weight. Seriously. Not that he'd ever try and campaign at middleweight again, but you know what I'm saying. Well, Billy Joe was told to Ring that he is now eyeing a return to the ring after a meeting with Frank Warren to discuss a possible comeback at light heavyweight. Yes, light heavyweight, you heard me correct. In September. My biggest goal, Billy Joe told the Ring, would be to become a 3-weight world champion, but let's just get back fighting and see where we are. Come back in September, eh? That's not that far away. That's really not that far away. Wow. I thought Billy Joe was done. I thought I think he'd said it himself that he'd retired, but Frank Warren, and then you got to remember, Billy Joe, his biggest fights came with Eddie Hearn. The Canelo fight was made with Eddie Hearn, and that's really actually is his biggest fight when you think about it. He only had a couple of fights with Eddie Hearn, didn't he? He had the fight on one of, was it KSI, Logan Paul, or one of them? It was on it wasn't called Misfits at the time, but they were on the undercard. He shared the undercard with Devin Haney. That was his Matchroom debut. And then he fought Martin Murray, and then he fought Canelo. So, and obviously the Canelo fight, although he was a Matchroom fighter at the time, Canelo was working with Eddie Hearn as well. It was clear who Eddie was favouring. It was an in-house fight, but Billy Joe may as well have been a Ben Shalom or Queensbury fighter, because he was just like, Canelo's my guy. So he's obviously, Billy Joe spent the majority of his career with Frank Warren, and his 2 world titles were as a result of Frank Warren. The WBO, of course, Queensbury tend to get very good rankings from the WBO. In fact, some fighters like Anthony Yard have had mandatory title shots as mandatory challengers without ever fighting an eliminator. He's had that twice now. And Billy Joe was able to go up to 168 pounds, fight for a vacant title actually there against an absolute no-hoper in, what was his name, Ishi Sufi or something Sufi, Isif Sufi or something like that his name was. You never heard of him before or since, so there you go. So, yeah, it makes sense. In terms of him coming back, listen, as I said at the start of this video, Billy Joe still had plenty in the tank following on from the Canelo fight, so it's a shame that he didn't persist and proceed, to be honest, or stay in shape, or try and do anything really. That was 4 years ago. You see, I'm going to bring up Chris Eubank Jr. because obviously that is the fight that they will build towards, because it's a big money fight, and light heavyweight is full of sharks. And Billy Joe Saunders, listen, Billy Joe Saunders was never a big 168 pounder, right? He's now looking at a division in light heavyweight which has sharks that aren't even world champions. You've got Benavidez, you've got Morrell, you've got Callum Smith, you've got Anthony Yard, you've got on the domestic scene Joshua Boazzi, you've got Ben Whittaker. The 2 champions, need I remind you, Beterbiev Bivol. You just, no. You ain't going to win a world title at that weight, no way. And given the fact, as I said, you're out of the ring for 4 years, during which time you've stayed in no shape whatsoever, you people, if he comes back in September, I'm telling you now, even if he fights an absolute pudding, I think people will be shocked at how much he's regressed. I genuinely think people will be shocked at how badly regressed Billy Joe is as a fighter. Seriously. He is going to look a shell of himself. And people want to talk about Eubank because obviously that's the fight that many people would make. Chris Eubank Jr. only mentioned Billy Joe during the week that he'd like to do that rematch, try and right the wrong from over a decade ago. I'd make Eubank sound firm favourite, heavy favourite, overwhelming favourite. Stop Billy Joe. Eubank is definitely on the decline. You know, I mean, the weight cut and the rehydration clause didn't help him in terms of his performance, so he was never going to look $1 million, even if it was a peak Eubank Jr. But you can see there is slippage there, noticeable slippage. That's going to pale into insignificance in comparison to Billy Joe, because unlike Billy Joe, Eubank hasn't been out of shape for 4 years. Eubank has been active, you know, maybe not as active as he'd want to be, but active enough to at least maintain some form of, you know, timing and stuff like that, you know, boxing ability. I think this comeback that Billy Joe was talking about, I mean, how is he going to shift the weight for one? He's going to be undersized even if he can shift the weight at light heavyweight, and he is going to get, he's literally coming back for a paycheck, and you can question his heart in the Canelo fight. I mean, I'm telling you now, if he fights, even if he fights a Boazzi, he'll probably quit in that fight. Because he is literally coming back for the paycheck. He ain't coming back to become a three-weight world champion. Hell to the no. I don't believe that. So, Billy Joe Saunders saying he could be back by September. If you're Frank Warren, you're thinking, well, he'll put some butts in seats and I can do a big fight with him and Eubank Jr. You look at his light heavyweight, you've got Willie Hutchinson there, you've got Anthony Yard, you know, I mean, there you go. I mean, if you're Frank Warren, you're just rubbing your hands thinking, okay, I've got Billy Joe back potentially, and I'm going to feed into some of my light heavyweights, or at the very least, I'm going to get a big payday with him and Chris Eubank Jr., you know, for Queensbury, and go up against Boxer. That'd be one of the few times where you'd make Ben Shalom favourite over Frank Warren. And even then, he probably wouldn't brag about it because, God, you wouldn't do that with Frank Warren, mate. You wouldn't do it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video as always, people. If you could, smash the like button, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. Until next time, peace.